Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billie. I'm coming to you today from Manhattan, where it's a nice chilly day. I got my beret on and my wool Santa's Garden sweater. I'll put the details of the sweater in the show notes and where you can find it on Ravelry. But let's start to talk right away about FOs, whips, and acquisitions. This is easy. There's no FOs this week. There won't be for quite some time. Although I am working on a teddy bear. That will be finished. So let me kick it off by that. I'm going to show you sweaters, but why am I knitting a teddy bear when I have these sweater projects going on? Because you'll remember from the last episode that I knit mittens and a hat in cashmere. I have some yarn left over, and I thought it would be cute to have a teddy bear with some kind of a Fair Isle motif. Maybe combination of these things, maybe the body like this, or the body like this, the face like this. I don't know. You know those little heron figurines? They have very interesting patterns. I'll put a picture of one here. I'm thinking something like that. But since I don't have a pattern specifically for that, I thought I would start by making just a very basic solid color teddy bear. So I had this yarn from a year ago. It's called Vinnie's Colors Serena. It's 100% bamboo viscose, eco-friendly. I wanted a sample of this color, and the guy at the booth at VKL didn't have any samples knit up, so I said, you know, I could knit you a sample. And then I took the yarn home and made a little sample swatch for him so people could see how it knits up. Long story short, he gave me the rest of the ball to keep, but I have nothing to do with such a small quantity of yarn, so I thought, let me try and knit a very, very basic, plain, solid color bear from a pattern that I have, and let me see what the stumbling blocks are. So I just wanted to show you I'm using vintage needles that were given to me by my friend Sabina. I have a bunch of other ones that she gave me, but I didn't have a spare pair of size 3 needles available, so I thought, oh, let me use these. The bear is knit in parts. It's all knit flat, it's not in the round. So here's what will be the head. When it's got stuffing in it, it'll be spherical. And then there's a little snout that goes on the front of it. Again, all the pieces are knit flat. And then through your last row of stitches, you thread the yarn through all those stitches and then pull it like a drawstring, and it pulls it to a closed point. So this little thing will stick out on his face like his snout. And there are 2 little ears. I have them hooked together so I don't lose them. That'll go on the upper part of his head. And there are 2 arms also attached together. The arms look very similar to the legs, so I didn't want to get them confused. The leg has a little bit of like a ball at the end to make it more paw-like. And here you can see I've tied this one up at the end. But they're so similar in size, the arms and the legs. I'm in the process of knitting the second leg, and then I just have to do the body. So I'm pretty sure the next time I see you, this will be complete. So that's an almost FO. Then at some future date, I'll try and do another one with some intricate Norwegian patterning on it. Not for anyone in particular, just for the challenge of doing it. So stay tuned for that. I also kicked off a knit along earlier today for the sweater that you see here. I'll insert a picture of what the rendering looks like. That's like a drawing in the pattern. It's done in green. I didn't want green. But the yarn that they used in the original was some kind of a mixture yarn. They call it mixture in the pattern, in fact. Well, I couldn't find such a yarn. I ended up going with a black fingering weight and a white fingering weight, and I'm holding a strand of each to get a fabric that looks like this. So this is my little swatch, and on my swatch I did 3 rows of garter stitch to see, well, you know, it's my habit to always do a garter stitch border on swatches to prevent it from curling, because as you probably know, when stockinette is knit plain, the edges tend to roll in and curl up. So there's really, yeah, like this edge I did not bother to do garter. I already got my gauge from here, and you can see that end curls. But the bottom edge, where there is garter, isn't rolling at all. Maybe a little. For some reason, in the sweater, let me pull this down and give you a better view of it. Notice what this is doing at the bottom of the sweater. There's a little bit of garter stitch border at the bottom, curling right up. So I looked on Ravelry, I looked online to find out if there's any information about how to prevent garter from rolling like that. And sure enough, I found a video that explained that you can either use fewer stitches or a smaller needle size to try and pull this in and prevent it from having this excess that's going to roll. So I did that. Most of the sweater is knit on a size 6 US, but I did this little border part on a size 3. It's still rolling. So I contacted Cascade, the makers of the yarn. By the way, here's a ball band. It's Cascade Heritage. It's a superwash wool, which I wish it wasn't, but I got hung up in looking for the colors and the right weight. It's not always easy to find exactly what I'm looking for. And I missed that it was superwash, or I might not have gone this route. Just FYI, it's 100 grams, 437 yards, gets 28 to 32 stitches to 4 inches on a size US 1 or US 1 to US 3. However, my gauge is different because I'm holding it double. I'm getting 5.4 stitches to an inch. So getting back to the sweater, well, before I say that, so when I reached out to Cascade and I asked them, is there something unusual about holding your yarn double, that it's curling like this, like what would be the reason? And I think I must have explained that I went down a needle size as well, and they're hoping that maybe when I block it, that'll block out. I'm not convinced, but I'm committed at this point. So perhaps if I can't get it to block out, I will do an applied I-cord edging. I think there's even a way to do I-cord in a purl stitch, which might be a different solution. I'm going to have to try a few things to see if I can get that to uncurl. Anyway, this pattern is most unusual because you start with this section below your waistline, and then when you get to the waist, you're doing ribbing. How many things have you ever knit where the ribbing is not at the lower edge? I mean, usually it starts with ribbing, so it's a little confusing. You get to here, you do this ribbing. Unfortunately, I guess it's the property of this yarn too, maybe the same reason why it's curling. My ribbing is popping forward on the right side of the fabric. On the wrong side of the fabric, you can even see it right here. It's depressed. It's pressed in. I would have rather had it be pressed in on the front side. So this is the back of the sweater. Maybe when I do the front, I'll try and think of some solution for that. I might try and do a row of either purling or something to change the transition from stockinette to ribbing that will make it press in instead of pop out. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like this is convex, the other side is concave. Can you see that? Maybe not so much. It is popping out a little bit here, and you can see that it goes in a little bit on this side. Anyway, the fabric is rather busy, so it may not be noticeable, but it's noticeable to me up close. Okay, so I have knit up to the place in the sweater where it tells you to split the back. There's going to be two parts that overlap. And I don't know if there's a button at the top or what's happening there. There's no buttonholes, but they do overlap, and I haven't knit up this side yet. The next time you see me, I probably will have that done. I'm out of yarn because I wasn't sure how much yarn to buy. And you know, a lot of yarn shops will let you return, but in a reasonable amount of time. The shop that I went to, Annie's, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, 3 months is your limit. And I thought at the time that I was buying the yarn, what if I'm not done in 3 months? I had no idea that this was going to work up as quickly as it is. I'm used to working on size 1 and 2 needles, sometimes 3, and my sweaters take me months, 2 or 3 months, sometimes even 4 months. So I never imagined that in a couple of weeks I would have so much already done. But what I did was I bought 1 ball of red because I'm going to be doing red accents on the sweater to make it sock monkey-ish. It's going to be red, white, and black. So I only need 1 skein of that. But I wasn't sure with the marling and holding the yarn double how far the yarn would go. So I bought just 1 ball of each. And I've run through mostly all of the white. I still have a lot of black. I'll explain why, because I obviously started with the same amount of both. But the thinking was, and the person who was helping me at Annie's agreed, that even if I go into a different dye lot, the black is still probably going to be very similar to this black, and the white will be similar to this, especially because it's going to be marled. If it is a little bit off, I don't think it's going to be noticeable. So I bought 1 of each to see how far it would take me, and it's very interesting to note that I was able to knit all of this, plus I started on 1 sleeve because I wanted to see, before I get to the front, how far apart these white bands would be. And I want to be able to place them down the front of the sweater to make sure that the top band isn't down here where you can't see it, but like in the rendering, the artist rendering, I want the top stripe to be up here. So if this is here, I really have to make sure that I space the other 3 stripes out so that they're not all bunched up and they're not all at the bottom. That's why I have less white, because I used it exclusively here and here. And the buttons on this particular sweater are knit, which is part of the allure of it. I just think it's such an unusual sweater. By the way, if you're interested in joining in the fun and knitting along with me, you can still do that. We did get started this morning, but it's been recorded. And for anybody who still wants to join, I'll put a link for how you join us, and I would send you a link where you can see a recording of our first session where, you know, we sort of start to review the pattern and go over some of the observations that I've already had since I've begun to knit it. So there are two sizes of button. There's the buttons that are going to go on the front, and then there's the buttons that are going to go on the sleeve, which are slightly smaller. So there's 4 on the left, 4 on the right, 8 total on the front. I've knit all 8 of them. I started with just knitting 1 because I thought, you know, if I space them out and knit them as I go along, I wouldn't be overwhelmed at the end with having to knit 16 buttons. But in reality, they worked up so quickly that it became a non-issue for me. So it's this little thing, and then you roll it up like a little Tootsie Roll, and it's going to go at the edge of the stripe. How cute is it going to be? I'm very, very excited. These are all the buttons for the body of the sweater, and the other ones are for the sleeves. So yeah, 16 little buttons. They look like candy canes or something. It's going to be very, very cute. But that's not all. I've also been making a little bit of progress on this. I had shown you, this is either going to be the front or the back. I'm not loving the pooling, so I've only knit part way up this side, and I've started to knit the other side, which is pooling in a different way because I combine the yarns in a slightly different way. There's not a whole lot to see yet, but I have this much done. I like how this pooling looks a little bit better. Now, some of you voted in a prior episode on whether I should use the right side as the outside of the sweater. Maybe I should do the reverse stockinette as the outside. And I am inclined to agree. I think this is maybe a little bit more interesting. Now, this sweater, I'll put a picture also so you can see. The bottom is like this, but on the top there's going to be a completely different yarn, completely different color. And I'm tinkering around with what that color choice should be. I could go with ivory, I could go with a pale gray, I could probably even find a lavender that matches. But I'm wondering if any of you vintage aficionados out there would have a suggestion of something that would be a little bit maybe more of the period, like something odd that they might have combined, maybe like a mint green or some kind of a magenta color. I don't know. I do have, there's that little sample. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, maybe. I did have this little swatch where I was trying to see if this other yarn would mesh with it. I was just playing around with different options instead of holding this lace weight yarn double to maybe hold a strand of 2 different things together throughout. Anyway, can you see that? It's sort of like a dark mauve leaning towards, I don't know, it's not purple, it's not fuchsia, it is, I don't know what to call this color. But it's contrasty, and I think something like that could work. I would love your suggestions. I also thought possibly a paler peach than this might be interesting. What are your thoughts? Stick with something very kind of dull and not exciting or give it some punch? I don't know, but I do know this. On January 19th and 20th, I will be at Vogue Knitting Live, and I will be looking at every yarn that's there. I'm pretty excited because Quince & Co. is going to be there. I've used their yarn, and one of the people who has been a guest on my show, Jessie, she thought that their yarns most closely resembled vintage yarns. I've heard other people who've been on my show, like Linda Ivell has a yarn that she prefers, and I think Sydney Creba likes one of Brooklyn Tweed's yarns. The first one that I had tried was Quince, and I was pretty pleased with it. I used it for my Harlequin, 3 different colors. So I'm excited to be able to see a whole booth of their yarns at VKL. But there are many other fine vendors there, so I will have a good look around. That's all the works in progress that I have. As I mentioned, no acquisitions, although in the next week or so, before I go on jury duty, January 19th, I was really hoping to be called when Trump was on trial, or some of the other celebrities in this town. We got them all. Let's see. I'll let you know on or about January 19th. No, did I say January 19th? That's Vogue Knitting. January 16th, I'm called for jury duty. I'll let you know on or around that time if I get on a case. Of course, I won't be able to talk about it, but if it's a celebrity, I'll at least be able to tell you it's somebody famous and it's a really good case. I got my fingers crossed, otherwise it can be kind of not so interesting. I've been a juror a couple of times before, and both cases were very, very fascinating. You can learn a lot, actually. Like, I learned a lot of New York City police rules about when they can and cannot discharge their guns, and yeah, other stuff like that. You know, you never know what's going to come up. Sometimes the expert witnesses are medical professionals or psychologists or experts in salaries and wages and lifetime earnings if the person is deceased and the family's trying to collect on what that person might have earned had they lived another 30 years, which was their life expectancy. You just never know. It could be very, very fascinating. So I'm looking forward to it in a way because I'll be sitting there all day knitting until I get on a case, if I get on a case. So I will be shopping for yarn so that I make sure that I go to the courthouse fully armed and loaded to keep myself occupied for the full day that I would be there. Okay, other things I want to talk about. Let's see. Okay, some of you may follow fashion news a little bit. In recent weeks, Pantone, the color experts, have come out with their color of the year. It's called Mocha Mousse. Now, this is a color that I don't see myself knitting with anytime soon because I'm more like the grays, black and whites, blues. Not so much into browns and beiges, but there's a lot of interesting talk about this color because it's the first time in 25 years that they've been doing a color of the year that they've chosen something in the brown family. So New York Times published an article which I would like to read to you because I think there's some interesting little elements to it. Before I do, I just want to add that according to Pantone, this warming brown hue imbued with richness was selected to capture connection, comfort, and harmony. So Pantone 17-1230 Mocha Mousse, you tell me if you think that this is making you feel comfort and harmony. Yeah, a nice dish of chocolate mousse would give you comfort, huh? Okay, here we go. Let me get this article. I'll give you the link to the New York Times article, but if you don't have a subscription to the New York Times, I don't know if you would be able to see the full article. The article is entitled Pantone's 2025 Color of the Year is Mocha Mousse. Is this shade of dusty brown a repudiation of brat green? On Thursday, this was written on December 5th, so I guess just shortly before that, on Thursday, Pantone announced its 2025 Color of the Year Mocha Mousse. Far softer than the brat green that dominated 2024, the shade is a nougaty brown that reminded Styles staff members of everything from luxury knitwear to swamp water. Pantone's trend prognosticators surveyed fashion and design to land on a color, quote, infused with subtle elegance and earthy refinement. Latrice Eisman, the executive director of the Pantone Color Institute, said in a statement. But in an oversaturated digital world, does Mocha Mousse stand a chance at defining 2025? Reporters and editors for the Styles desk sat down to deliberate. Let us know what you think in the comments. And then there's a series of quotes by these different people. Vanessa Friedman. So after Viva Magenta and Peach Fuzz, Mocha Mousse? This is the first time in the 25-year history of Pantone's Color of the Year that they've chosen a shade of brown, which is kind of a big deal. I admit, my mind went immediately to comfort eating. Alex Vadukul said, I also got warm and comfort food vibes. I was getting 1990s Java and internet cafe vibes. Stella Bugby said, my mind went to what happens after comfort eating. Jeremy Allen, Pantone's official imagery tries to guide us in a more appetizing direction by showcasing a goblet of tantalizingly whipped mousse. But my mind keeps pivoting to the ubiquitous swirled smiling emoji that shares a similar tone. I'm going to put pictures of some things that I found that relate to what these folks are saying. Misty White Siddle said, it reminds me of kayaking in alligatory parts of the Everglades, pure swamp. Callie Holterman, it's a kind of dusty brown, a touch warmer than William Wegman's Weimaraner portraits, but less saturated than a bowlful of brownie batter. Farewell, Brad Green. More comments from these people. Last year, T Magazine predicted we'd be wearing a lot of brown in 2024. Did that happen? Another one added, I've noticed a broader pivot in neutral accessories, which have been trending away from black shoes and bags toward warmer brown tones. It can create a softer effect. Friedman added, I do think brown is a fashion neutral that's often overlooked, but one that's especially popular with Italian brands and their focus on leather, cashmeres, and other plush materials. A brown leather trench is sort of the eternal Milan Fashion Week staple, so I can see this becoming a thing. Bugby continued, if I saw a Loro Piano scarf in this color, I think I'd want to buy it. Friedman, when I spoke to the Pantone folks, they talked a lot about the search for harmony, which they felt Mocha Mousse represents. I was surprised, given how much this year has seemed to be about disharmony, a state that shows no sign of ending. But then they also said the goal was aspirational and that mousse was a kind of foodstuff made for sharing. Vadukul added, the news release also gives some sense of what the Pantone people had in mind. They said Mocha Mousse appeals to our desire for comfort and that it represents a growing movement to align ourselves more closely with the natural world. I'm not going to read all the names. You can go to the article if you really want to see. I'm just going to say, another comment. It feels like such a repudiation of Brat Green, which was a viral moment that no corporation could have predicted. So in that way, it feels out of touch. There's something inherently un-internet-y about a prediction. It asks us to essentially force a moment in time, whereas a meme seizes it. I guess one broader thing to consider is, to what degree will this actually catch on? We've seen colors like bright green and burgundy drive trends in fashion, but neither of those colors were selected by Pantone. Did Peach Fuzz or Viva Magenta ever catch on in any legitimate way? Or Very Perry, for that matter? Don't forget Very Perry. Perhaps this is another example of the different realities that now exist at the same time. In one world, Brat Green; in the other, the Pantone color of the year. But does the Pantone color of the year actually reflect any reality? It certainly drives an avalanche of product-related announcements. I predict many cosmetics companies and chocolatiers will embrace this one. That the green shade was so intentionally off-putting ended up helping it explode. And this color seems to be the opposite. Pantone, with its endless dessert metaphors, seems to want to offer us something tasty and comforting. Its collaborations with Motorola and a zillion other brands aim to turn that feeling into, well, consumption. What was the runner-up for the color of the year? What would be your nomination? One person said she would choose gold. It feels like we're in a new Gilded Age. The incoming president does love a bit of gilt. In the wake of Catalan's wall-taped banana sale, ... Yes, banana yellow would be a great color of the year. It really would. It feels prophetic, timely, and a bit deranged. And then the last person says, everything is bananas. Another thing in fashion news this week, a little on a sadder note, the passing of Rosita Missoni. And again, a New York Times article, I'm not going to read you the whole article, but there's an obituary about her. I'll try and get a picture of some Missoni knits to show you an example if you're not familiar with that name. An Italian brand of knitwear. Very intricate knitwear that's done on a machine, not by hand. Really complicated stuff. And expensive and beautiful. Christmas and New Year's, my cousin was visiting from Paris. He and his wife had been living in Manila since the time that they're married, about 10 years ago, but his employer relocated them, poor thing, to Paris, which is his hometown originally. So anyway, long story short, they were in New York for a visit. They really haven't been here since they're married. And it was, of course, wonderful to see them. Now, the latest, hottest New York tourist attraction is the Summit. I have not been there. It's a brand new building at 1 Vanderbilt Avenue on 42nd Street. Just across, they designed an alleyway, and I'll show some pictures here, but they designed an alleyway where there used to be a street, Vanderbilt Avenue. Now it's like a little pedestrian area that separates this brand new skyscraper from Grand Central Terminal. So we moseyed around that neighborhood with them and went into Grand Central, and I have some images that I wanted to share with you here.
yo sé que sí salieron, pero que no, no sabía que había venido.
So that wraps it up for this week. Thanks for spending some time with me. Love your comments. Would love to hear your comments. Would love to hear if you're going to be at Vogue Knitting Live, because there might be an opportunity to meet up, have a coffee together, or I'm offering to take people to the Metropolitan Museum of Art sometime leading up to the weekend or during the weekend. I will have started jury duty right around then, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be available on Friday, but certainly Saturday and Sunday I could work in time, or if people are going to still be around on Monday. So let me know if you're coming to New York and what your schedule is like, and maybe we can work something out if there's a small group of you. I hope everybody who's in a part of the world where the temperatures have really plunged, I hope you're able to keep warm with knitting draped over you. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care.